There's some misconceptions about what rescue dogs are like, and are they all unwanted? Are they all behavioral? Do they all bite? Are they all only used to being outside and can't live in a house? So I think that raising the awareness of the fact that these are great dogs, and just from the circumstance of where they were born is the only reason that they're in this challenging position of not having a home.
Welcome to episode 21 of the Pawdoption Guide podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Muir, and this is your one-stop shop for the knowledge and advice you need to adopt and integrate the rescue dog of your dreams. When I say the words rescue dog, what pops into your head? Do you envision street dogs in the Caribbean scrounging for food? Is it more of a general image of a timid dog cowering in a corner? Or do you just see a dog in a kennel at a humane society or a shelter? Well, I've come to learn that rescue dog is a loaded term. So many of us, even those of us that are familiar with owning rescue dogs, have these preconceived notions about rescue dogs, where they come from, and the issues that come with getting a rescue dog. And it really grinds my gears that we've all been trained to think of rescue dogs as less than their counterparts, purebred dogs or puppy mill dogs these days, or backyard bred dogs. And that's why I'm taking the opportunity to get the opinion of the rescue on rescue dogs. Who are they? Where they come from? And, what behaviors they might come with when they're ready to be adopted. And this is also that we can get a more appropriate and up-to-date perspective and vision on what rescue dogs are in 2022. So please join me in listening to my very first podcast interview with a founding member and volunteer for New Collar Collective. Welcome, Liz Sauer. She's the co-lead for intake at New Collar Collective. I'm happy to have you today.
Yes, thanks very much for having me and us on your show.
Yeah, thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about New Collar Collective?
Sure. New Collar Collective, we are a foster-based cat and dog rescue. So that means we don't have a shelter. All of our animals that come into us and are immediately placed into loving foster homes. We are mainly based in the Greater Toronto area, kind of the 2-hour radius of Toronto, but we've just onboarded a new vet clinic in Guelph. So we are hoping that we'll start to move out a little bit west, because there's lots of great homes and great fosters and great adopters in that area as well. So most of our fosters are within that 2-hour radius.
Great. That's awesome. Can you tell me a bit about what inspired New Collar Collective and how long you guys have been out there rescuing dogs?
Sure. We started talking about starting a rescue around, I think our first meeting was in January 2020. We were a group of, passionate dog and cat rescuers, dog and cat parents, who wanted to do something to help homeless animals, and started having a conversation about starting a rescue that really supported the animals, supported the fosters and the volunteers and our community, and how we could go about setting up a rescue that would do all of those things. So we started talking in January with a planned launch of April. And little did we know that COVID was going to hit, and not only hit, but stick around for so long. So that definitely changed some of our plans. It caused us to do a little pivoting in our launch, in our events, in how we did rescue, but not only ourselves, but all the rescues were faced with these different kinds of challenges. But you learn to be flexible. Rescue's never linear and never easy. So it was just one of those things that you need to pivot around. And my apologies if you hear any barking in the background throughout this interview. I have 2 6-week-old foster pups from northern Manitoba with me.
No apologies needed. I'm sure our listeners don't mind. So from New Collar Collective's perspective, where would you say rescue dogs come from?
So for us, we've really brought in our dogs from all over. If you're talking geography, we've concentrated our efforts on building partnerships with rescues so that we get to know the types of dogs they're setting up, the types of needs. We partner with some networks within Canada, both in Manitoba and in Northern Ontario, to help with overpopulation of dogs in Canada. There's a real lack of access to vetting in our northern communities. So they have the challenge of many litters of puppies, large dogs that are, roaming, that can sometimes be dangerous for both the dogs and the people. So we bring dogs in from northern communities in Canada and we partner with some networks that are really great about building the partnerships with those communities so that they are helping communities and not just going in and taking dogs. The two puppies I have here, for example, were a litter of 4. So we have the 4 puppies in our care. The mom stayed back in Manitoba as part of Canine Advocates Manitoba's spay and neuter program. So she was spayed. We sponsored the spay, and then she goes back to her loving family because not all the dogs up there need rescues. Sometimes they just need help with access to what we consider to be just basic services here. Like I can't even imagine not being able to bring my dog to the vet. These communities don't have any access. So it's one of the ways we can help with dog overpopulation in Canada. We've also brought dogs in from the States. The United States has some significant overpopulation with dogs and cats. And in some states, they still have very, very high kill shelters, which is something we don't have in Canada. Yeah. So a lot of times when people are asking, why are we bringing dogs in from the States? They have way more dogs than they're able to adopt out. And some of these dogs may get a day or 2 in the shelter. And if they're not adopted out right away, they are put down. So we do help with high kill shelter states. And we've also brought in dogs internationally from places like Mexico or some of the Caribbean islands where dog overpopulation numbers are sky high. They don't have people who adopt them. Street dogs and street cats on the islands and in Mexico are very, very high. So we have partnered with some rescues down there as well to bring some animals. And we've even brought some dogs from abroad where there are shelters that reach out to rescues in Canada because they are looking for good places for their dogs to go. So we have brought in some from places like Armenia or Iran or Turkey, depends on who's reaching out to us.
Okay. Yeah, that is quite varied, right? It's not a one size fits all there. That's a lot of unique situations, right? Getting maybe a street dog or is a street dog not necessarily the type of dog you would be getting?
Well, street dog is they're not necessarily coming straight from the streets. Usually we work with partners that have shelters, in Mexico or on some of the Caribbean islands where they have shelters. So they'll bring the animals in, they'll get to know them, they'll provide them with some basic vetting care. They work very closely to know that the dogs that they're sending up are adoptable because it's important to make sure that we have a dog before we take them in and place them in a foster family. It's important to know the basic vetting has been taken care of because we don't want to be bringing things into Canada that we shouldn't be. Yes. And that the dogs are healthy enough to travel and that they have the proper vaccinations and have all of the care that they need. They are also seen by our vets up here and receive additional vetting. And all of our animals are spay and neutered before they are adopted because that's important to reduce overpopulation here in Canada. But yeah, so they're not straight from the streets.
That's good to hear.
Into our homes.
Yes. It's good to hear, because I do think that's important that rescues actually have relationships with shelters over there, because if, it's across an ocean or, on a different continent or even in the States, right, to have those relationships so that there's processes that are being followed before really having that transport. Because that's definitely, as a veterinary technician, that's one of those concerns I have about dogs from from across the border or from across an ocean? Is that, there could be some transmission of parasites that aren't endemic to this area, things that we can start to deal with here that, we might not have had to deal with before. So it's great to hear, and gives me a lot of confidence that rescues are putting that effort into creating relationships so that they can trust those sources.
For sure. And that's the important thing that you need to look at is you need to look at or talk with rescues that you want to adopt from or that you want to volunteer with is where are they getting their animals from? How are they ensuring that those types of problems aren't coming up? And I think the one place I forgot to mention, we do take in animals locally as well. So we do work with some shelters in Ontario to help empty Ontario shelters. We don't typically have large numbers of overpopulation. We don't have street dogs roaming down the streets of Toronto, but we do have animals that are in need locally as well. So where we can, we help those animals as well.
So I guess when you're talking about New Collar Collective's perspective on rescue dogs and where they come from, you're talking about lots of different backgrounds. What would you say, if we're thinking more about their homes or environments, what's the average home or environment you're seeing?
So some of the partners that we work with have a shelter environment. So they might be outdoor pens, or they might have big indoor shelters with some pens outside that they spend time in. Some of the partners that we work with both have both a shelter and fosters where they can place some of their animals. So they are able to let us know if the animal is used to being in a home, has ever been in a home, looks like it came from a home just because of the behaviors that they might be exhibiting in a shelter, and generally what type of behaviors that animal or that dog has. A lot of our northern dogs are used to being outside a lot. But also many have had homes or have homes and just aren't able to stay. So many animals, even if they've been in a shelter, they do transition quite well. We tell all of our fosters to expect a few accidents just as they get used to the routines. But most animals, most of the dogs adapt really quickly to being in a home and get used to the routines of when it's time to go outside, when it's time to eat and go for a walk and things like that.
Great. Yeah. Routine's definitely key to that puzzle, isn't it?
For sure. We work with a network of rescues. So for example, the run that these guys came down on, there was probably about 45 to 50 dogs that came in, but they went to 10 different rescues. So a lot of times when rescues can work together like that, we can make a bigger difference and save a lot more animals at once, but then still keep our intake small because then we get to know the dogs a little bit better. We get to know the fosters and we're able to support, and then we can make really good matches for the animals when they come. Puppies are easy, but we also bring in adult dogs and larger dogs and smaller dogs. And so having that smaller intake really does help us get to know the animals and get to know what people are looking for.
We got some puppies.
Got some puppy playing. Yep.
Some puppy whimpers.
The toy was stuck. It was tragic.
Get it out. Oh, that's kind of interesting perspective, when you talk about it being better if you can take in a smaller amount of dogs at once.
It's really dependent on how many fosters we have. And right now, many rescues, not just New Collar, are really looking for fosters. We never have enough fosters for the amount of dogs that need intake and need care. So if anybody's thinking about fostering, check us out. It really is the only way that we can take in animals because there is always a need, and we cannot take in animals if we don't have fosters for them. So, but even if we had 100 fosters, we would never take in 100 dogs at once. It's just not, we said from the start, from that very first meeting in January 2020, that we didn't want to take large intakes all at once. It's hard on the team. It's hard on everybody. So doing smaller ones more often just allows us to keep things moving smoothly.
Yeah. Quality over quantity.
Yeah, I think so. Burnout is real in rescue. There's lots of rescues out there that are burning out because the need is constant.
Yes. In the want to be able to help everyone too, right?
In the want to be able to help everyone.
Compassion fatigue.
Yes, exactly. And the amount of dogs that need help that you just can't help because you can't save every dog. So
yeah. Do you think that what you explained, your description of where rescue dogs come from, do you think that jives with the public's impression of rescue dogs?
Of where they come from? I don't think so. I think there's a group of the population that thinks we just don't have a dog problem, a dog overpopulation problem in Canada.
Yeah.
Which isn't true. We may not have street dogs running around your city streets like when you go on vacation and you see them all over the islands, but Northern Canada has a significant dog overpopulation problem that needs to be addressed. So we do what we can there. The lack of access. And then I think when there is an awareness from the general population that there are overpopulation of dogs in Northern Canada, there is some misconceptions that it's due to lack of care, and it just isn't. It's due to lack of access to vetting and basic services that we just take for granted down here. Yeah. You can't drive 14 hours to the vet when a dog is sick.
Yeah.
Where some communities don't even have roads, but even where they may have winter roads, sometimes it's just not feasible. So I think the misconception is that A, we don't have a problem in Canada, and B, if there was a problem, that it was caused by people not caring about their animals in their communities, and that it couldn't be further from the truth. In the States, they have high kill shelters, which is something we don't have here in Canada. So I'm not sure if people really understand the huge overpopulation that exists in the States, and that the dogs, really great dogs, are put down not because of anything other than the fact that they were born there and there's too many and there's no more space. And no more space in the shelter is a terrible reason to put a dog down. So it's, I think sometimes the misconception comes from not understanding the differences between, that doesn't exist here in Canada. So how can that just be the same in the country that's right next door to us?
Yes.
And there's a much different attitude towards spay and neuter of dogs down in the States and in Mexico and in the Southern Islands. Here, almost everybody spay and neuters their dogs.
Yeah.
That's just what we do.
Yeah.
And they don't down there. So there is just nonstop unwanted litters being born. And I think that it's just, I would never consider not having fixed my dog. Like, that's just not something. Yeah. And I think that's most Canadians, that's just normal.
Yes.
And to not understand that that's not normal everywhere.
Yeah, that's certainly an unusual thing to come across in Canada, right? It's the exception, not the rule, for
exactly.
sure. Yeah,
exactly.
So what would you say you think is the biggest misconception about rescue dogs?
I think people feel that they are unwanted and that they have a lot of baggage, and that is either their behavioral, they can't live inside a house, they won't get along with my lifestyle, they won't be good on walks. All sorts of things that it's just a sweeping generalization across rescue dogs that can just as easily happen with a dog you buy from a reputable breeder. Most likely going to happen if you get them from a backyard breeder. But every dog comes with its own little quirks. Like they're not cookie cutter perfect things out of the box. They are work. They need
like
training.
People.
Like people. They need training. They need boundaries. They need flexibility at times too, but they need your time. They need playtime. They need walks. They need exercise. They need their brain stimulated so that there's a whole mental enrichment side to dog care that there's so many great resources out there. So I think the misconceptions of the behaviors are probably one of the things that keep people away from rescuing dogs and adopting rescues. The majority of dogs are fantastic. Some of them need some training. I think that can be said just from about anywhere.
Are you worried about getting in over your head with dog adoption? Quit struggling and start thriving with your rescue dog. Join the Pawdoption Guide membership experience today. Find the link in the show notes so you can stop daydreaming about your perfect dog and get the solutions to adopt it. So I guess how would you think that we could best overcome these misconceptions about rescue dogs today? On the idea that we don't have an overpopulation problem in Canada, but also maybe that, these are unwanted dogs. as well,
yeah,
right?
I think rescues can certainly play a role in education and awareness, and being very clear about where animals are coming from, where the dogs are coming from, how we're building partnerships with northern communities, how we work with partners in the States, because this is the situation they live with, and this is how we can help. I think people that are fostering and adopting can spread the word as well as to what their experiences are. There's some misconceptions about what rescue dogs are like, and are they all unwanted? Are they all behavioral? Do they all bite? Are they all only used to being outside and can't live in a house? So I think that raising the awareness of the fact that these are great dogs, and just from the circumstance of where they were born is the only reason that they're in this challenging position of not having a home. And raising awareness and sharing that information, and sharing experiences about how these dogs fit very well into condo life into Toronto, depending on the dog. Or maybe it's a dog that needs to be out in the suburbs because city life isn't quite for them. So it's a big difference from a shelter in Mexico to downtown Toronto. But dogs are also remarkably adaptable if we provide them with the tools for success. So getting them trainers, giving them boundaries, giving them time to decompress, all of these things that we want our adopters and our fosters to do are keys to the success. And any of these issues around behaviors or bites or medical problems, they happen with, especially with backyard breeding dogs, but also with reputable breeder dogs. And it's all about the supports you put around the dog to ensure that there's success for the dog, but also for the family that's adopted this dog. So I don't believe that, we may not know their stories, but that doesn't mean that they have baggage.
Yes. Yeah, I like that one. My dog, Geller, he was from Georgia, and he was brought up here to a Chatham Kent Animal Rescue. And that's where I was able to adopt him from. But, very easygoing, easily integrated dog when it comes to rescue dogs. But, his only crutch was that he was born in the States and, in a high kill shelter, right? So there really are those dogs out there, and they don't all have behavior problems.
Sure. We'll also recommend training as part of the adoption based on what, if we've not already provided training during the fostering time, which we do as well, where needed, we'll let adopters know that there's, requirement to do some training. Puppies especially, you need to build that bond. You need to set the foundations, because otherwise, especially with a lot of these northern pups, they're going to grow up to be 60, 70 pounds. Yes. And an untrained 60, 70 pound dog, taking them for a walk is not fun. So you really want to build those relationships with any dog that you bring in, whether it's a 6 or an 8-week-old puppy. They don't go, oh my goodness, they don't go home unless they're over 8 weeks. But every dog needs those foundations, needs the training. It's foundational, and it helps build the bonds.
Yeah, that's across the board for sure. So if someone were deciding between getting a puppy through means other than a shelter or rescue, or getting a rescue dog, what would you say to them to help them make that decision?
So I'm clearly biased, and I think that everybody should adopt and not shop. So I'm going to start with that as the premise, but I do understand that it's not for everybody. So I'd say full stop, never buy a dog off Kijiji. You don't get to see the parents it came from. You don't get to see the condition they live in. Kijiji is just the place where backyard breeders sell their animals, and that is bad for dogs. That is bad for adoptive families. There are so many horror stories of the health conditions that these dogs come from. So number one rule, don't buy a dog from Kijiji or a cat. If you want to adopt from a breeder, do your research. And do your research, I would say do your research either way, rescue or breeder. A reputable breeder will never question you questioning them. They will never stop you from seeing the mom and dad. They will never stop you from seeing their facilities. Same thing with a rescue. Do your research. There are good rescues and there are not so great rescues. And it's important to find out from those rescues where the animals are coming from, what kind of vetting do they receive, what kind of support can you expect as an adopter after you go home with this animal that is brand new into your home.
Yeah, that's certainly something I saw a lot of during COVID, was that, people were frustrated by the adoption process and the difficulty to adopt. And so although they were initially, gung-ho about rescuing, they just said, I'm too impatient. I'm just going to go get my dog. And unfortunately, impatience is the worst thing for
sure.
A dog owner to have, because you're now, rushing a process that is a lifelong commitment, right?
For sure. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is a lot of people who are now trying to surrender their animals, not just to New Collar. Rescues, our inboxes are inundated with people who said, oh, I got this dog off Kijiji and it's now this. It's now 18 times bigger than I expected. It's now not fitting into our lifestyle, or it's not, so many reasons. And it's heartbreaking to continue to get these emails in asking for places for the dogs. So we help where we can.
What would your best advice be for people struggling to adopt a dog right now?
Patience. Adopting a dog, it is not something that happens overnight. It is not something that happens super fast. Sometimes it can if the right dog comes along at the right time. Rescues are working so hard to match these dogs with the perfect family. And if you aren't the chosen application, it's not that you weren't the perfect family. It's just there may have been 3 perfect families for that dog, and we can work with you to find another dog. I know throughout this whole pandemic, throughout the years, people will quickly go to other options, but I would really encourage people to have faith and have patience and have conversations with rescues. Put in a general application, talk with an adoption coordinator about what kind of dog you're looking for, what your lifestyle looks like, and we'll find the dog. It may take a bit of time, but we have time. These rescue dogs don't. So trust in the process. We may be asking you for references. We may be asking you to do a phone interview and a virtual home visit. All of those things are so that we can make a really good match, because rescue adoptions are for keeps. We don't want dogs to come back.
That's a great policy. I highly, highly back your request for patience, because I think it's a really important decision in someone's life, and your bond with your dog is really important and is going to make sure that you're fulfilled over time and that dog is fulfilled over time, and so that compatibility has to be the thing that comes first in all that you do, right? And not just I need a dog and I need it now. That if you're thinking that way, that's really not the way to be going through this process. Yeah.
No, it's not an impulse decision. And a lot of times people will have done a lot of thinking before they start, which is fantastic, but they also need to be able to have patience on the other side of that, making that decision.
Well, that's where patience comes in, right? Because one week, say you're looking for a whole week and there's been new intakes, but they all happen to be small dogs, but you really want a large dog. Well, then wait for another few weeks and maybe you'll see more large dogs, right?
Exactly. And we do have people that have stayed in our files who they, maybe didn't match. They met the dog and it wasn't quite the best fit for a family. But they asked to remain, within our files. And when the adoption coordinators or the adoption team see a dog that looks like would be a good fit, they'll reach back out to that family and say, we got one that we think might be a good match, and they'll talk about that dog. So it's possible for sure. Our fosters also adopt a number of our dogs as well. So it all depends on who comes in as we're doing our intakes.
Can you tell me about maybe the quickest an adoption may occur from application to adoption, like to bringing the dog home? What could be the quickest situation, and what is the more average situation?
So our dogs are all held for at least 2 weeks for a decompression period. It allows us to get to know the animals, allows us to get to know them, to get their vetting as complete as possible. Sometimes it takes a little longer than 2 weeks, but no dog is released until all of their vetting is complete. So they don't go up onto the website until that 2-week period is over. So that would be the first time an applicant may see them. They may see them on our social media sites in terms of available soon, and they may choose to put an application in earlier. Generally, some of it is dependent on how available an applicant makes themselves. So there's a phone interview to start. First you fill out the application, and then it's reviewed by our adoption team. And then there's a phone interview, a virtual home visit, a reference with the vet. And then once you are matched, you have a meet and greet with the dog, with the foster. You get to meet the animal and make a decision. If you move very quickly from your phone interview to your home visit to your vet reference, if all of those things, are done in a timely way, recognizing that volunteers on our side are also needing to fit this in with their lifestyles, that part can take maybe a week to 2 weeks. And then once you are matched and agree to or decide that this dog is the dog that's, your next family member, there are some requirements in terms of equipment that you need to have, and a seatbelt, a collar, leashes, and you sign an adoption agreement, and you pay the adoption fees. So I'd say two to 3 weeks once if everything goes 100% smoothly. We generally tell people, our fosters, that with dogs, it's generally around 4 to 6 weeks that dogs can be in the care. But this is there's no science to it. Yeah. You will have the phone interview on day 1. You'll have the home visit on day 4. You'll there's so many things that go into it. We try to provide, a standard of service that is responsive, but does need to fit into the fact that people have jobs and do rescue on our off hours. So, but we try to move things along as quickly as possible, recognizing that people want to get their family members home as well.
Yeah, I think that's a helpful reference point. I would agree that from my experience that it has usually been the quickest you can adopt a dog, especially from a rescue versus a shelter, is usually that 2 to 3 week period. So people can expect that it's going to take that, even if you have everything falls in line really quickly. Yeah. And from your application forward, that it could still take 2 to 3 weeks at least, right?
Yeah, and I would say that two to 3 weeks is once you hear back from us. Yes, because it can take a couple weeks for us to be responding to applications. So we try to do things, again, like I said, in a timely manner. But once you've heard back from us and you're in discussions about a dog, then it's usually probably, I'd say, 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's important for people to kind of understand that even if you find that perfect dog and you apply for it, it's still going to take that amount of time at least for everything to fall in line. So you do have to remain patient during that time.
I think it's hard sometimes when you fill out an application and it goes out into the ether and you're like, I've heard nothing. What's happening? Yeah. So I do understand the impatience and where it can creep in. Yeah. But we do our best to get back to people as quickly as we can and respond.
Yeah, don't let that faith falter in that quiet period. There is stuff happening behind the scenes, right?
100%.
What is it likely that the rescue is going to be seeing when they bring dogs in? What's really common in terms of behaviors?
Say we take in 10 dogs and they will all be behaving differently. Some of the dogs come off intake and they are ready to party and they are like, you're my new human. You're going to feed me and love me and walk me. And this is fantastic. That happens. Yes. And that happens often. And it's really usually basic walking skills on leash are a top one for dogs across the board. Yes. Shelters do work with walking them on leash, but it's not a typical behavior for whether we're getting dogs from the north or whether we're getting dogs from down south. So basic walking skills are almost across the board. So out of those 10 dogs, some of them may come out and they'll be super shy. They'll just come off a transport. Sometimes that's a multi-day transport. And they're really shy and they haven't got a clue of what is happening. And they may have come from an island and they're landing in Toronto and it's winter. Or they're coming from a community where they spent most of their time hanging out with their dog pals and now they're a single dog in the house. So that dog may be a little more shy, maybe a little more reserved, and they just need some time to get used to the smells and the sounds and the new people and what's the routine. And giving dogs that time to decompress is so important. And that's why the dogs are held for 2 weeks, because the dog that you meet on the day that they come in to the dog that's 3 days later to a dog that's 3 weeks later is so different. So those shy dogs may just need shorter walks or walking the same block every day for 3 weeks. And you may be going out of your mind because you're bored, but that dog is getting used to all the smells and the noises and the people. And maybe they've never seen a streetcar before. For some of the dogs that are reserved and shy, it's giving them the confidence. Going up and down stairs for some dogs that have lived in a shelter environment or an elevator, all of these things are brand new. And those are things that the dogs just need to get some extra help on. Reactivity on leash often is something that we see with dogs. And there's a huge difference between reactivity and aggressiveness. We work with our partners to ensure we aren't bringing aggressive dogs into our care. But we do get reactive dogs. And there's a big difference between a dog that's dog friendly in a shelter while they're in an open space and not on a leash compared to a dog who is now on a leash, doesn't understand why he's on a leash and has to walk on the sidewalk and ignore the fact that there's a dog on the other side of the street. So there's a lot of barking and there's a lot of, trying to get to those dogs. So we work with our fosters to work on reactivity where it's a little stronger in some dogs. We'll bring in some trainers to help the dogs get some basic skills working on before they're adopted into a family. So reactivity to dogs. Sometimes there's some resource guarding around food. So if they've had to fight for food and toys and things like that from when they were, on trying to fend for themselves. Yeah. The fact that they have food security isn't something that these dogs may know. So that's just practice with them, getting them fed in their crates so that they know that they don't have to protect their food. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of tips and tricks for all of these behaviors that our foster coordinators work with our fosters. And then we also have that same support for adoptions with our post-adoptions team to provide some support for adopters to work through some of these behaviors.
Well, and that's great because that's one part where I feel like there are a lot of homes that could be forever homes, but people just fail to reach out to get that help when something comes up and they just let that little behavior fester into something that kind of gets in the way of their bond with their dog.
Yeah. Or they just wait too long. And, training isn't just when your dog has now been allowed to get away with all these things for so long and is now out of control. Like training is at that basic foundation level of building that relationship with your animal. And you need to do your research and you need to find a trainer that is doing training in a way that you're comfortable with and that's good for your dog and the needs that your dog has, but it can really, really set you up for success. There's a graphic that's around that's, the 3 day, 3 week, 3 month rule, quote unquote rule. And it really talks about decompression with a dog, because even if a dog has, is with a foster for a month and has really settled in, they're going to kind of start over again with you because you're the brand new house as the adopter. And
you're going to have completely different rules.
Yeah, they may settle in a little more quickly, but they still need to decompress in your house. And it still takes a few months before a dog is fully at home. And during that time, you can see some behaviors settle out, but you might also see some new behaviors emerge as they're becoming more comfortable. And some of those you're going to want to work on so that you don't have a larger problem down the road. But that's the same with a rescue as it is whether you adopt from a reputable breeder. That's a dog thing. That's not a rescue dog thing.
Well, I think that pretty well covers it for today. I really appreciate your perspective, Liz, on the intakes at New Collar Collective and where rescue dogs come from.
I really appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to be able to talk with people like you who are working to raise awareness and to help rescue dogs find homes.
That just about wraps it up. So thank you for joining me. And if you enjoyed it, please take a screenshot on your phone and share it on your Instagram or Facebook story. You can definitely tag at Pawdoption Guide or at New Collar Co. so that we can see what feedback you have to share with us about this episode. And hit the subscribe or follow button to make sure that you get updated when new episodes of the Pawdoption Guide podcast air. Thanks a bunch for listening.